Hey, it's Natalie.
Hey y'all, it's Madeline.
And I'm Autumn, and this is TWT. Hey everyone, welcome back to TWT. My name is Autumn, and today we have yet another special guest for you all. Today's topic will cover transitioning from undergrad to grad student at TWU. With me, I have our special guest, Elena Speck, a current occupational therapy student at TWU. So, Elena, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Hi, everyone. Autumn, thank you for having me. So, I'm Elena. I'm 24. I'm from Bonham, Texas. I actually went to UNT for undergrad. So, I've lived in Denton about 6 years now. And I'm a third year student in OT school as well as Autumn. So, I'm really excited to graduate this May and start working.
And Elena, we are so excited to have you. So,
Thank
I
you.
guess our first question, can you share a bit about your background and what inspired you to pursue a career in occupational therapy?
So I always wanted a career in healthcare. So in high school, I started researching different healthcare professions. And I knew about physical therapy because I think most of us know about physical therapy, but
Right.
occupational therapy was a new profession I hadn't heard of. So I researched a little bit more about that and I got in touch with some family friends. And one lady was an OT at a skilled nursing facility in my hometown. So she let me shadow her in high school and I really enjoyed it. And I thought it would be an extremely rewarding career and just allow me to use my personality and personable skills to help people and make a difference.
Wow, Elena, that is impressive. So, we know that
Yeah.
you chose TWU to obtain your doctorate in occupational therapy, but what factors did you consider when looking for schools?
I think the main factors was location. I wanted to stay in
Mhm.
Texas because I'm really family oriented and I wanted to stay close to my family. Also, paying out of state tuition wasn't something I was wanting to do necessarily.
Right.
Um, so a lot of schools I also saw they were kind of in the transition from a master's to a doctorate program.
Mhm.
And a lot of them were still a 3 year program, even for a master's. So getting a doctorate was another factor I considered when looking at schools. And obviously, TW was offering a doctorate. And I think that was their second year when we were applying. Um, so, yeah. And also, I looked at the rankings of each OT program. And I think in 2020, when I was applying, TW was ranked number 17, I
It
think.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was ranked pretty high, and that's in the nation, so it was pretty good.
I know. And congrats, I guess, to both of us because we both got
Yeah,
in.
there we go.
I know. So, Elena, were there any particular experiences or courses in your undergrad studies that prepared you for the challenges of graduate school at TWU?
So we do a lot of group work in grad school, as you know, Autumn.
Mhm.
Almost every assignment and project is based on group work. And so in undergrad, we did a lot of that as well, but not to the extent that we do in grad school. So I think that really prepared me communicating with different people I didn't know, finding out how I can contribute in a group setting, learning my strengths and weaknesses because definitely have some weaknesses there with group work. It's not for everybody, but and also presentations in undergrad prepared me to get those initial nerves out,
Right.
presenting, getting used to talking to a group of people alone. And so we do a lot of presentations every semester in grad school as well. So I think those are the two main things that really prepared me the most.
Yeah. And even for me, like I didn't go to UNT, and that's where Elena went to her undergrad.
Yeah.
We did a lot of public speaking at my undergrad as well, and I think it prepared us a lot,
Yeah.
especially me, because we have to
Oh,
speak to clients, we speak to our professors, we're speaking to our cohort. It is just so
yeah.
important that we get the message across.
It
So I
definitely,
agree with that too.
yeah, gets you out of your comfort zone. It's still nerve-wracking in grad school, but not as bad as it would be if you didn't have any preparation at all.
Absolutely, 100%. So I know the admission process for any graduate program can sometimes be challenging. Can you tell us how you navigated that?
I think researching different programs in the area that you're wanting to go to school in,
Important.
understanding what requirements each program has because they all have different requirements, whether or not you need to take the GRE, what scores you need to have on the GRE if you do have to take it. The deadlines for applying are different for every program. The number of shadowing hours are different. And also just looking into all of that and trying to check it off your list and keeping a schedule of it all and doing it as soon as possible was really helpful to have all your ducks in a row because it's daunting and there's a lot of information you have to keep track of. And then another big thing was securing your letters of reference,
That's
making
important.
sure you have really good letters. If you have professors that you connected with in undergrad that would be willing to write you a letter, that's something I would think about too if you're still in undergrad, and securing that. Um, but yeah, I think those are the main points. Just having a schedule, having a calendar, checking things off your list, and being on it because it goes by really quick and there's a lot of details and things that you can miss,
I
and it can
agree.
totally mess up your entire application process.
Right. And it's tedious. And you're right. I
Very
think being
tedious.
organized is the best way to go about it.
Yes.
Even for me, I reached out to a lot of different people on social media, like
Yeah.
almost kind of a mentorship thing on like,
Yeah.
hey, I have a question about this. I saw that they were
Yeah.
a first year student, and I think that also helped a lot too.
Definitely. If you know like anyone who's been in any graduate program, I think that'd
Right.
be a good source of advice and guidance because obviously you're not going to know how to apply right off the bat. You're going to need
Right.
some help. So reaching out to anyone would be extremely helpful.
Right. And for everyone who's listening to this podcast, I hope that you can find this information helpful when, again, it's your time to apply.
Yes.
So Elena, so can you describe the difference between your undergraduate and your graduate level studies?
Graduate level studies are way more dense than undergraduate. I mean, I feel like I had a lot more free time in undergraduate. And I was still taking my studies very seriously.
Mm,
But in graduate school, you have way less time. There's a lot of information you have to learn in a short span of time. So it can be very stressful, but kind of finding out how to manage your time and your study style and figuring out what study style works best for you and getting it done in that way. But I think they're different. They're different levels of hard, but undergraduate just seems much more dense in the information. And it's
right.
information that you need to know and that you need to like digest because this is our career and this
Right.
is stuff we're going to take and apply. So you can't just breeze through it and just try to get the grade and move on.
Yeah, you really have to understand what you're
Yeah.
doing. But even for me, I've noticed that, graduate school, they're not going to hold your hand through the process. You really
Right.
have
It's
to
very
figure it out.
a lot of self discipline for
Correct.
sure.
Yes. And clearly, TW is a very competitive doctorate program for occupational therapy for a reason. They're
Yeah.
not just admitting every student. They're not just looking at your GPA, they're looking at all the other things
Right.
that you have to delegate and do to make sure that you can keep up with the rigorous course.
Right. Because everyone in the program got there because you're all qualified to be there. So
Right.
now it's like, who's going to stick with it? Who's going to get their stuff done? Who's going to make it a priority? And I think that's an
Exactly.
added level of stress, but it's obviously you would know
Yeah. No, I
it's
definitely
graduate
know.
school. It's not going to be easy. So
It's not, but it's definitely rewarding for sure.
for
So
sure.
and now that you're a graduate student, what challenges did you face during the transition and how did you overcome them?
I was really nervous transitioning to graduate school. I'm always nervous for a
Yeah.
new like experience, anything. I'm nervous I'm going to fail. I'm nervous that I won't figure it out. I won't be smart enough. But managing my time, I think, was the biggest struggle because you're in graduate school and you think, okay, I need to devote all of my time on my studies and I can't have any free time. I can't do anything I wanted to do before I went to graduate school. But
Hmm.
then you realize like you need to do those things to stay sane and like for your mental health. And so figuring out a balance. and occupational balance
Right.
for those things and making sure you still do them, but you're still studying as much as you need to be. It was very challenging. And sometimes I would feel stressed about doing things I wanted to do that weren't related to school.
Hmm.
Um, but that was a big one. And then figuring out my study style, because when I got into graduate school, I'm looking at the other students. We're all relying on each other, in the first few semesters on how to navigate and seeing how they study versus how I study. I was trying to maybe study more like them. And then I realized that that wasn't really working for me. And so if you have a specific style that you used in undergrad and it worked for you, then I would carry that into grad school
That's
because
good. Yeah.
everyone's different, everyone learns different, and there's no right or wrong way of studying. So
Right.
that was another challenge, but we figured it out.
Yeah, no, we definitely did. And honestly, with graduate school, it really is trial and error.
It
Because
is.
I remember in the beginning, I was doing a lot of in-depth reading, but I wasn't processing the information.
Right,
And
right.
so we created study groups. And I think learning from peers was really beneficial for us and kind of bouncing ideas of like, hey, that's that. Or like one of our friends would kind of lead the session and I'm
Yeah,
very visual. So she would put up a
yeah,
visual and really, kind of talk about that. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that makes so much sense. But in the
yeah,
beginning, I just thought like you just have to read, which you obviously should read, but it's just everyone is so different for learning styles. And you kind
yeah.
of, grad school and even undergraduate school, you just develop the best way for you. And we're all
Yeah,
different, and that's
we're all
okay.
different. And sometimes you think you aren't doing enough when you hear what other people are doing to
Right.
prepare for something, but people are different in the way that they learn. So if it's working for you and you're doing good on your exams and you're like digesting the information
Mhm.
and it's sticking, then there's no reason to change that. So
Yeah. And I think what my biggest struggle was, and for people who are listening, I think comparison really is the thief of
it
joy
really
in
is.
it in for life in itself, but especially for graduate school because
Yeah,
you're not competing anymore to try to get into the program. You're only truly competing against yourself.
yeah, you
It's
are.
important that, if your friend got an A and you got a B, you still did really well, and you're still going to pass and we're all going to graduate at the end of the day. So, and
Yeah.
jobs are not asking, oh, well, Elena, what was your GPA in OT school?
Right. Or
They're
did you
focused on your
did you
experience.
make an A on that anatomy exam?
Exactly. Exactly.
Why?
So once you're in graduate school,
Yeah,
grades, obviously you need to keep above a 3.0, but
right.
you don't need to be competing to have this,
No, that was a really big issue for me too,
mm,
the first few semesters, especially because we started graduate school with anatomy, which
right.
was so hard. But comparing myself and my grades and performance with my peers would like eat me alive. And I was like,
Mhm.
am I even going to make it to clinicals? So you cannot do that. You really cannot do that because
You
you're going to
can't.
psych yourself out. You're going to be stressed 24/7 like I was. And focus on yourself. That's all you can do.
I love that. Hear that, everyone. Okay, Elena, can you share any specific resources or strategies that were particularly helpful for you during your transition?
Probably just making or reaching out to people who I knew had been through grad school. So, a few of the OTs I had shadowed in high school, I would text them and ask them for advice.
Oh, that's nice.
And then my sister, she is a speech pathologist. So, it was great to have her around because she's been through grad school and she works with OTs. So she would give me phone numbers, connections to other OTs if I had questions like that. I think making connections early can really help you when you're transitioning. And that's something I did,
Extremely.
really
Yeah.
helped me navigate. And I still obviously was scared and had questions, but they were like, you'll get through it. It's hard and it's scary at first, but you'll be able to do it. So I think their support really helped. So I would really um like try to find that support from people who have been through what you're about to start.
I think
I
that
think
is huge too.
yeah,
Like Like I was
Just
kind of
like,
mentioning earlier, I reached out to people on social media, but you were lucky enough to have your sister who's an SLP, speech language
right.
pathologist, and she is within the realm of the interdisciplinary team. And so she has those connections. But for anyone, I mean, social media, shadowing experiences, anything you get your hands on, make those connections because, like you were saying earlier, you need letters of reference too.
Yeah.
And when you
And
build that
that,
good
yeah.
rapport, then you
Being
can always,
rapport and, shadowing and like asking questions that with those
Mhm.
people before you start, they're definitely going to want to write you a letter of recommendation because they see that you're willing and you make the effort to learn about it and show up. So
Exactly. Elena, has the management of your workload versus personal responsibilities changed since becoming a graduate student at TW?
I don't think it's changed as much as what it was in undergrad. It's just a different level of workload. Luckily, I know there's a lot of people in our cohort who have children, they're married, they have a lot of big responsibilities. Um, and I'm single, I'm not married, I live alone. So, fortunately for me, I don't have as many personal responsibilities as some people may have if they
Right.
were in those, stages of life. But seeing all of those people who do have those responsibilities like go through this program has given me so much like motivation. And I just admire them for getting through this 3 years because it's been tough for someone who doesn't have all of that going on. So
Right.
I can't
Yeah.
imagine having all of that going on and still sticking through it, getting it done, managing both sides of that and figuring it out. And I'm sure it was super hard, but props to them. If they're listening, you know who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. No, seriously, like I always think to myself, like if they can do it, I can do it because
Right.
I'm
So
in
it
the same
makes
boat as
you
Elena, single,
exactly
and I'm, like not a lot on my plate.
right. It makes you
No
kind of
children.
appreciate
So
it.
yeah, very
You
much
don't want to
so.
complain as much because if they're getting out and they're doing this, they're studying, they're showing up to class,
Yeah,
I can do it without complaints. So
exactly. Exactly. If they are listening to this, they are absolutely amazing.
MVPs.
Yes, and we are almost done. Elena was mentioning it earlier. We aren't graduating in May of 2024.
Yes.
It's long
Yes.
names, but we are almost done. The finish line is near. It is.
So
Um,
cool.
so Elena, what advice do you have for undergraduates considering a career in occupational therapy and contemplating graduate studies at TWU?
I wish personally I had I shadowed different settings, but if I was in high school or in undergrad, I would have shadowed as many settings as possible,
That's good advice. Yeah,
many settings and as many populations. Even if you don't see yourself working with kids in the future, still go shadow pediatrics. Same with adults. Because when you get to your clinical rotations, you don't have control over where you're going to be placed. And
that is
so
true.
if I had been placed in peds, I didn't have a ton of experience with pediatrics. And I think that's something I probably would have struggled with a little bit. So when you do have time in undergrad, just try to reach out, shadow as much as you can, because it really will be helpful when you get to your clinicals. If you have a little bit of experience in that basic foundation of what goes on in each setting.
Right. Elena, where did you do your shadowing at? Like what settings were you at?
I shadowed a couple skilled nursing facilities. So that
Okay.
was, I really focused on those because that was the population I wanted. And
Hmm.
so that's why I'm kind of saying this because I wish I would have kind of branched out a little bit. I also shadowed a hand therapist,
Okay.
and that wasn't something I was really considering, but I thought it'd be a good experience, and it was.
Hmm.
And then I did in the school setting. So I did
Oh, okay.
elementary, junior high age kids, and that was really, really good too. So
Yeah, yeah. And the thing about occupational therapy, if people listening that aren't familiar with it, like there truly are so many different settings that you can go into and specialize in. I mean, there's neuro, there's inpatient, there's acute. Elena was mentioning hands. There's a sniff, there's schools, there's
Yeah.
outpatient peds, there's so many different, there's
So
health.
many.
I mean, yeah, and I do believe because not similar to Elena, I took a gap year, and during my gap year, I had three jobs. So I was an ABA therapist. So I was working with children on the spectrum. So I
Mhm.
think with that experience, I was able to really have a better understanding going into OT school, like what, peds kind of looked like with OT, because I would go to people's homes and OTs would be there and we would always collaborate. So,
Yeah.
and I also nannied for a little boy on the spectrum too. So even though for our doctorate program, I did not have a field work with kids, I feel as though, because Elena and I will have to take her boards exam, but having that experience, even though that was a couple years back now, I can still recall those events.
Right.
So,
Like
like
when
Elena
you're
was
put
saying,
into the
having
setting.
dabbling in all
Yeah.
of those different settings is really, really good because
Hmm.
then you go into OT school like, oh, I kind of seen that, or like, oh, I've worked with
Yes.
that,
And when you're shadowing, I wish I would have asked way more questions
Mm,
because I was afraid I was going to sound like dumb. But obviously, I'm not even in grad school yet. I'm not going to know anything. Ask as many questions about everything that's going on because that stuff would have stuck with me into my clinicals. And
exactly.
I wouldn't have had to ask those same questions in my clinicals when I really felt dumb. So just ask questions and shadow as much as you can. It
I
really
love
will.
that. And you heard it from Elena. So, Elena, do you have any other tea to spill for the viewers? I know you gave us so much great information.
I would just like to say I'm so proud of Autumn and I. We're about to graduate. We're going to be done.
We are.
Autumn's going to move to California, probably.
Yes, that's the
I'm
goal.
going to stay here in Texas. But I seriously cannot wait to graduate. And we're doing our capstone right now. We're getting all of that figured out. And it's
Elena,
going.
do you want to tell everyone what you're doing for your capstone?
Yeah, so I'm doing program development at a
Awesome.
senior center in my hometown, Bonham. So it's located in a more rural area.
Mhm.
So it's hard to get volunteers at this center. It's hard to keep participants coming. A lot of people just don't know about it. And it's hard to get the word out in a small town like that. Obviously, they probably don't have access to social media. So I'm going to enhance their current programming, add some activities to increase social participation and hopefully promote their quality of life overall. So I'm excited because I definitely want to work with the geriatric population. So I
I think
think,
that is so great. It's going to go so well. And you start next Monday, don't you?
yeah, I start next Monday. So,
Wow. And
mhm,
kind of honestly, similar to Elena, I also love geriatrics too. And my
yeah,
program is more in a suburban area in my hometown in the Chicagoland area. And it's a digital fall prevention program for seniors. So it's our gym, I didn't realize it has a lot of seniors. It has about 900 of them. So I think it'll go really, really well.
yeah.
So everyone keep, the good energy and who's ever listening. We are almost done. And if you are considering, getting your doctorate in occupational therapy, truly TW is a great program. So
Yes. And
it's
if you
your
have questions, reach out to Autumn and I.
yeah, absolutely. So, all right, everyone, that concludes our episode. Thank you so much, Elena, for joining me and providing pertinent information about transitioning from undergrad to grad student at TWU. I hope you all will utilize this information when it is your turn to apply for graduate school. My name is Autumn, and thank you all for listening to yet another podcast of TWT. Until next time, pioneers.